Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Bible study of the book of James. We're studying about fulfilling the royal law. James 2, 10 and 11 says, "For whosoever shall keep the whole law, and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. For he that said, Do not commit adultery, said also, Do not kill. Now if thou commit no adultery, yet if thou kill, thou art become a transgressor of the law." James here in verse 10, when he said, "For whosoever shall keep the whole law and yet stumble in one point, he's guilty of all." He's quoting from Deuteronomy chapter 27 and verse 26. Now, the point of verses 10 and 11 is that if you're going to live under a mindset of law, and again, as James is dealing with here, partiality is a law, a self-made law. But if you're going to live under a mindset of law towards others, then the same law applies to you. That's the point, that in part that James is making. And I'll give you a reference here. Jesus dealt with this in Matthew chapter 7, verses 1 and 2, when he said, "Judge not that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you shall be judged, and with what measure you met, it shall be measured to you again." And so the point is that's a very strong statement. In other words, how you deal with others is how God is going to deal with you. That's a strong statement, isn't it? How we deal with others is how God is going to deal with us. When he said, "Judge not that you be not judged," he's not talking about proper judgment that you and I as believers have. We are to judge. We are to judge the message. We can judge the fruit of someone's life. We can evaluate that. If it's sin, then you know what? We can judge it as sin. Immorality or cursing or things like that, that's sin. And we can evaluate that in someone's life and recognize that as sin. But where we go wrong, and this is what Jesus was getting to, in judging the heart of someone and judging someone's motivation, that we're able as God to read the heart of someone. That's where we have to be careful. And in this passage here in Matthew chapter 7, continuing right after verses 1 and 2, that's where he said, and I'll paraphrase it here, where he said, if you want to remove the speck out of your brother's eye, well, first remove the plank out of your own eye. That's a pretty strong statement. If you want to remove the speck out of your brother's eye and want to be the great corrector, you want to be the great sanctifier for all the believers, well, first remove the plank out of your own eye, the beam out of your own eye. The beam, really, it's a beam of self-righteousness, a beam of self-made partiality. Remove that. Let God deal with that first before you start trying to be the great sanctifier for everybody else. And so James in this passage is dealing with the believer living by law in regards to sanctification. And he made this statement, "Whosoever shall keep the whole law, yet stumble in one point, he is guilty of all." And when he made that statement, keep the whole law, he's making a theoretical statement. Theoretically, to keep the whole law, not realistically, because it's not realistic. Nobody can really keep the whole law. Nobody can do that. It's impossible. But he's given here a theoretical statement. So theoretically, if you keep the whole law, I mean all of it perfectly. But if then, he said, yet you stumble in one point. And to stumble in one point means to violate just one law, either intentionally or unintentionally. He said you have become guilty of all. It's like a chain, a bicycle chain. And if one link is broken, the whole chain really is broken. It's not usable. It's the same point here. If you keep all of God's law, and he's really dealing with the Old Testament law, if you try to keep all of it, and you do, but then you break one law, you violate one law, either intentionally or you even just make a mistake, and it's, oops, I didn't mean to do that. He said, you're guilty before God of all. You're guilty of God of all of it. So James, is James teaching here in the book of James? Is he teaching that we can be righteous before God on law keeping? Absolutely not. He's teaching just the opposite. If you're going to go that route, if you're going to have to be perfect, and of course nobody is perfect except the Lord Jesus Christ. And you know, Paul dealt with the same thing in Galatians chapter 3 and verse 10 when he said, for as many as are the works of for as many as are of the works of the law are under the curse. For it is written, cursed is every one that continueth not in all things which are written in the book of the law to do them. So if you're going to go that route, you're going to have to be perfect. And if you're going to go that route of partiality, your judgment and how you judge people is going to have to be a perfect judgment. And if you judge someone wrongly in one way, just one way, then you're a breaker of it all. You're a breaker of all the law. And so, brothers and sisters, don't go that route. Don't go the route of partiality. And that concludes my lesson on James 2 and 10 and 11. God bless.